It's time for a relaxed interview, and I want to introduce to you my first guest of the afternoon, who shares his name with one of the United Kingdom's most famous spin doctors. And in fact, you could say that some of his skills aren't too dissimilar to that of a spin doctor. I'm not going to look at his face to find out whether he's wincing at my description, but this local Alastair Campbell moved to Leicestershire in the late 1990s, so our locality is his home. We're going to learn about his home life and his work life. Alastair Campbell, welcome. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Can we start with let's start with just a description of your business activity at the moment as it stands, because I notice here on your bio you've got your web address is themarketingmentor.co.uk, and then your email address is alastair@idealmarketingcompany.com.
Yes.
Now, tell me just explain both of those to begin with, and how you describe yourself as a business being these days.
I mean, my main business is the Ideal Marketing Company, so
right.
that's my main web address. For quite a few years, I've also been running some additional training and support for small business owners who don't necessarily want to take on board a marketing consultant, but want to learn about it. So that's where the Marketing Mentor website
So in other words,
well.
You give them the skills, you teach them how to fish effectively,
yes,
so that they can, rather than take on an expensive member of staff, just get really what works.
That's right, yes. And it depends a lot on the business and the individual concerned. Some managing directors have got certain skills that may be very good at people management. Maybe they're always very entrepreneurial, coming up with new ideas, and frankly the last thing they want to get involved in is day-to-day marketing, or perhaps they want a bit of assistance with marketing, and that's who most of the clients that we work with, that's the type of people they tend to be. We've also in the past worked with literally hundreds of clients now who want to do the marketing themselves, but they're not quite sure how to go about it. So we teach them how to do their own PR, how to write their own website copy, and so on.
I imagine, lots of people have got home pages, their own websites. They're into Facebook and social networking, the likes of Twitter. We might get on some of that a little bit later. But you're a local fella. You're living the Market Harbour area, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. Lived in Market Harbour since 1997.
Okay, so you've been heard so many times on BBC Radio Leicester over the years, and I heard you speaking to our Sally Pepper just last week, and it was when I was hearing you chat to her that I thought to myself, my goodness, what an interesting fellow. I bet there's so much more to talk about. What I want to do, first of all, before we have our first piece of music, I want to wind the clock back to work out where all this kind of marketing stuff and all your kind of business ideas and passion, where that started. So with a name like Alastair Campbell, it's perhaps not a surprise then that you were born in Scotland back in 1967. Let's start with home life to begin with. Just draw a picture of your family life. Are you from a big family?
From a very small family, actually. Okay. Yes, I was an only child, and I went to... my parents stayed in the same house all their life until my dad died about 11 years ago, and my mum has now moved on since. So it's a very stable upbringing. Stayed in the same house from when I was born until I left to go to university in London when I was 18.
And how would my mum's an only child as well, and how did that affect you, but particularly from a sort of education point of view? Because often people who've got a brother and a sister, you get that kind of competitiveness within the family, don't you? Where siblings try and, outdo each other, perhaps in a school setting, but you had no yardstick, did you, other than your peers at school? So was to then move into advertising and marketing, you're obviously a very driven person. I'm trying to work out where that started.
Well, actually, for me, it started, I think, possibly as an only child. I used to play with myself and come up with my own games and own ideas.
So you're very inventive.
Well, from the age of about 11 or 12, I used to make my own films. That was the way in.
How did you do that?
Well, I used to write scripts, and I saved up my pocket money and bought an old Super 8 camera. And I used to coax my friends from the end of primary school and the start of secondary school into being in little films that I would make, little 5-minute stories about ghosts that were attacking the school, or there was one that was about an earthquake and so on. So they were generally had a little bit of special effects in them, and looking back on them, they weren't always the greatest films. But I made about 2 or 3 films a year, probably from the age of about 12. up till the age of about 16.
And sorry, is this on celluloid or on video?
Yes,
Video, right? So on old-fashioned celluloid.
Yeah.
Which is you can't go and re-record it once it's done. It's done. And also, it's expensive, wasn't it, to do that?
It was, and a lot of the film, like an entire film would be made out of 2 film canisters. They're about 3.5 minutes long each, and so there was almost everything that we did was either the first take, or if it really went wrong, we would go to a second take, or maybe film the end bit of it again.
Okay.
But it's amazing what you could get away with editing. Where if somebody started to laugh or whatever, you'd cut away to a reaction shot and then cut back to them.
And you
again.
were physically cutting the film to edit this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So where did and again, you don't just learn that on your own. I mean, did you have someone that was mum or dad or anybody encouraging you to do that kind of stuff with film?
I don't think they had any interest in that at all, actually. No, it was just something that I've always enjoyed film. I've always enjoyed going to the cinema and so on. And I just found something fascinating about being able to come up with stories. In our garden, we had... it probably sounds like it was very extravagant, but we had a couple of sheds. So we had a garage, we had a little work shed, and we had this old tin shed that looks like it was built in the 1930s, and it was just full of rubbish and bits and pieces. And I cleared that out and turned that into a little cinema in the back garden. So we had about 10 seats in there. It was big enough for about 10 seats. And where the screen was, we had some white cloth that went across. And in there, I found an old, large wooden fireplace. And that then became the surround for the screen. And
I love that idea. That's fantastic. So
I would put on my films, and I would charge people 2 pence or 5 pence or whatever. And
did you fill it? Did you fill it?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. I wouldn't charge the cast who were in the film, but I would charge other people.
There has to be some benefit, doesn't there, to be starring in this thing?
And that would help finance the next film. So that was my own little studio.
And were you also a projectionist then? Did you also kind of run the projector?
Well, there wasn't a lot to it, so yes, I would turn it on and off, and yes.
Gosh, have you kept any of these films? I mean, are you the kind of hoarder? Do you hang on to this stuff?
I've got a few of them. I've got the latter one because the last 2 that I made, those were actually the films that got me into college when I went down to London. It was I studied a degree in film and television.
So you did this for years then? You kept it going?
Yeah, and that was what I did. My degree was in writing and directing at film college.
Gosh, that is incredible. And the notion then of having this sort of little mini cinema. I mean, what did your parents think to all that? I mean, were they very encouraging, or did they think it was some kind of phase that would pass, or did they know that you would hang on to this desire to be this kind of creative being?
My dad was an accountant and my mum was a hairdresser.
See, they were sensible, weren't they?
They had very sensible jobs, yes. So I wouldn't say they discouraged me, but they never actively encouraged me. I think for quite a long time at school, I was going to become a hotel manager because that seemed like a very practical job that could be done anywhere in the country. And this being in the early 80s in Scotland, there was an awful lot of unemployment, not dissimilar to today. So I certainly... Whilst I enjoyed doing all this, for quite a long time, it was always something that I would love to do rather than something that I thought I would ever do at any serious level. And so my time at school was very seriously focused on getting good results at my academic studies, so I could go on and do a proper degree somewhere. I remember, because you and I are about the same age, you're a tiny bit older than me, and I can remember, this is at a place called Reek Valley College in Syston, in Leicestershire. I can remember being about 13, maybe going on 14 years old, and we had our first sort of careers chat. The careers officer, had a little session with everybody to try and work out what kind of subjects you'd want to do at GCSE that would kind of inform your near future. And be related to maybe some kind of profession. And I remember this fellow with a beard, and a bad jumper, sort of saying to me, "What would I like to do?" And I can remember even back then, because we had a little radio station at the school, that we'd started, a group of us had started, and in fact Tony Wadsworth, one of the presenters here, came to do an interview with us, and it was truly lovely. And I can remember just being absolutely fascinated with what radio was, and how exciting it would be to be able to push all the buttons and have the jingles play and do the interviews and everything. And he said, "Well, what would you like to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm quite interested in radio, actually." And you could see this kind of glazed look come over him, because he really didn't know what to say. He'd seen a book, which was from, I think it was from
I think it was from the British Phonographic Society or something, about music production, but that is as close as his knowledge came to radio. And he kind of did as much as he could to sort of dissuade me from getting too excited about it. And I answered one of those questionnaires, and the questionnaire told me that I should have gone to be a social worker. Right. We all had to do one of those surveys at school, and it sort of came up with a list of suggested jobs that might be right for you. Yes. And the top of my list was social worker. Radio was nowhere to be seen.
That's interesting, because it was a computer program, wasn't it? That they had.
Do you remember it?
Put all these things down. Well, I remember my two choices. Number one was film editor, and number two was marketing assistant. Those are the two choices that came up.
Well, it got it right for you, didn't it?
Yes.
So you must have been very, very honest and...
we must have had a better computer.
A better computer. But no careers officer tried to give you those second thoughts. Mum and Dad said sort of, you ought to have a standby plan and have some kind of sensible ideas. Yeah. But actually none of that deterred you from following a dream, did it?
I think I got to the stage where I realised that actually that's what I really wanted to do, and whether I would end up working in it. And as it turned out, I'm not really working in that field at all. It took a sort of a sideways diversion, but certainly I wanted to have a go at it. And I mean, some of the people that I went to college with have actually gone on to do some quite interesting work. You know, one of them has produced films with Scarlett Johansson, and one of them is a very successful TV commercials director who's made a lot of award-winning commercials. So it was obviously quite a good course.
It worked, didn't it?
It didn't quite work for me.
And this is Westminster University. Has it changed its name now?
It was Harrow College when I was there, right. And then it became, not long afterwards, became Westminster University. Yes.
Are you in touch with any of the people that you studied with?
One or two of them, yes.
Those names you mentioned.
One of them is a very successful animator, actually. He was best man at my wedding, and Andy is now he runs an animation course at Falmouth College, but his wife works for Aardman Animation. She won one
of the biggest names in the industry.
She won a BAFTA for Shaun the Sheep, which, you know, the Aardman TV children's show. She was the executive producer on that.
And again, if you take an example like that, you know, Shaun the Sheep, it's the root idea of that whole film that actually is a winning idea, isn't it? The execution of it has to be great too, but getting that first idea to be a hot idea is the answer. And that's exactly the same in marketing, isn't it, really? You brainstorm until you hit what everyone has a consensus that will work.
I'm a big fan, in terms of marketing, of trying to come up with a single idea or a hook, I sometimes call it. And if you've got a central benefit for a product or for a company, you can often hang a number of other ideas off that. And that's often the case with a film or a TV show or whatever. It's got to be the central idea has got to be right. And if you haven't got that right, you can have all the production values in the world, you can have the best cast in the world, it's not going to be any good. And so getting that central concept right and working well for the target audience, if you don't get that right, then it's never going to work in the long term.
Okay, I know you've worked with some of the biggest names in the world, really, the likes of the NHS, Prontoprint, Hush Puppies, one of my favourite names I know you've worked with. We will talk some more after we've had a little break for some music. This is Squeeze.